Essays on Untouchables and Untouchability Political by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Chapter 1 3. The findings of the Census Commissioner of 1911 regarding the total population of the untouchables was confirmed by the Census Commissioner of 1921. The Census Commissioner of 1921 also made an investigation to ascertain the population of the untouchables. In this report, Part 1, Para 1931, the Census Commissioner observed, it has been usual in recent years to speak of certain sections of the community as depressed classes. So far as I am aware, the term has no final definition, nor is it certain exactly whom it covers. In the quinquennial review on the progress of education from 1912 to 1917, chapter 18, paragraph 505, the depressed classes are specifically dealt with from the point of view of educational assistance and progress, and in Appendix 13 to that report, a list of the castes and tribes constituting this section of the community is given. The total population classed according to these lists as depressed amounted to 31 million persons, or 19% of the Hindu and the tribal population of British India. There is undoubtedly some danger in giving offense by making in a public report social distinction which may be deemed invidious, but in view of the lists already prepared and the fact that the depressed classes have, especially in South India, attained a class consciousness and a class organization, are served by special missions raised by philanthropic societies and officially represented in the legislative assemblies, it certainly seems advisable to face the facts and to attempt to obtain some statistical estimate of their numbers. I therefore ask provincial superintendents to let me have an estimate based on census figures of the approximate strength of the castes who were usually included in the category of depressed. I received lists of some sort from all provinces and states except the United Provinces, where extreme delicacy of official statement shrank from facing the task of even attempting a rough estimate. The figures given are not based on exactly uniform criteria, as a different view is taken of the position of the same groups in different parts of India, and I have had in some cases to modify the estimates on the basis of the figures in the educational report and of information from the 1911 reports and tables. They are also subject to the general defect which has already been explained, that the total strength of any caste is not recorded. The marginal statement gives, however, a rough estimate of the minimum numbers which may be considered to form the depressed classes of the Hindu community. The total of these provincial figures adds up to about 53 million. This, however, must be taken as a low and conservative estimate, since it does not include the full strength of the castes and tribes concerned and the tribal aborigines more recently absorbed in Hinduism, many of whom are considered impure. We may confidently place the number of these depressed classes, all of whom are considered impure, at something more between 55 and 60 million in India proper. Then came the inquiry by the Simon Commission, which was appointed by the British Parliament in 1929 to examine the working of the reforms introduced by the Government of India Act of 1919 and to suggest further reforms. At the time when the reforms, which subsequently became embodied in the Act of 1919, were being discussed, the authors of the Montague Chelmsford report clearly recognized the problem of the untouchables, and the authors pledged themselves to make the best arrangement for their representation in the legislatures. But the committee that was appointed under the chairmanship of Lord Southborough to devise the franchise and the electoral system ignored them altogether. The government of India did not approve of this attitude and made the following comments. They, that is untouchables, are one-fifth of the total population and have not been represented at all in the morally minto councils. The committee's report mentions them, untouchables, twice, but only to explain that in the absence of satisfactory electorates, they have been provided for by nomination. It does not discuss the position of these people or their capacity for looking after themselves, nor does it explain the amount of nomination which it suggests for them. The measure of representation which they propose suggested that one-fifth of the entire population of British India should be allotted 7 seats out of practically 800. It is true that in all the councils there will be, roughly speaking, a one-sixth proportion of officials who may be expected to bear in mind the interests of the untouchable. But that arrangement is not, in our opinion, what the report 1 on reforms aims at. The author stated that the untouchables also should learn lessons of self-protection. It is surely fanciful to hope that this result can be expected from including a large single member of the community in an assembly where there are 60 or 70 caste Hindus. To make good the principles of the report, we must treat the outcasts more generously. The government recommended that the seats allotted to those untouchables by the committee should be doubled. Accordingly, in place of 7, they were given 14. It will be seen that the generosity of the government of India, when put into practice, did not actually amount to much. It certainly did not do to the untouchables the justice that was their due. Among the problems that were not properly settled in 1919 was the problem of the untouchables, which was bound to loom large before the Simon Commission. Quite unexpectedly, the problem received a special emphasis at the hands of the late Lord Birkenhead, who was then the Secretary of State for India. In a speech which he made on dash just before the appointment of the Simon Commission, he said, left blank. Naturally, the problem became a special task of the Simon Commission. Although the problem as presented was one of providing representation and in that sense a political system at the bottom, it was a problem of ascertaining the population of the untouchables, because unless the population was ascertained, the extent of representation in the legislature could not be settled. The Simon Commission had therefore to make a searching inquiry into the population of the untouchables. It called upon the various provincial governments to furnish returns showing the number of untouchables residing in their area, and it is well known that the provincial governments took special care in preparing these returns. There can therefore be no question regarding the accuracy of the figure of the total population of the untouchables. The following table gives the figures for the population of the untouchables as found by the South Borough Committee and by the Simon Commission. Left blank. The end.